Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's book, the show comparison for the Expanse Season 2, Episode 9, The Weeping Somnambulist. This video is part of a series of videos where I compare episodes of the Expanse TV show to the source material, pointing out the differences and giving my opinions on how well I think these adaptations work. So I'll start with a spoiler warning for the Expanse up to the end of Season 2. However, this video will not contain spoilers from the novels beyond Season 2, but will give away events that occur in the novels that already cover the events of Season 1 and 2. So if you haven't read the books, you are safe from future spoilers, provided you have seen up to the end of Season 2. So our episode begins with the introduction of the Weeping Somnambulist, a relief vessel on its way to Ganymede to deliver much needed relief supplies. The Somnambulist is manned by a married couple of Mordechai and Melissa, who are upset when they are boarded and inspected by a Martian patrol. Melissa is upset and argumentative, but Mordechai cooperates, not wanting to cause any trouble. After the Martian soldiers inspect the cargo, they inform the pilots that they are confiscating the ship and its cargo, which sets off Melissa in a rage, who attacks one of the Martian soldiers, knocking off his helmet, revealing that it is in fact James Holden. The other soldier takes off his helmet to reveal it's Amos. Mordechai recognizes Holden and who he is. So in the novels, the first Holden chapter we get, he's on the Rocinante chasing pirates who want to attack the relief vessel, the Weeping Somnambulist. The second Holden chapter begins with Holden, Naomi, and Amos on the Weeping Somnambulist and explains that they were sent on a mission by their employer, Fred Johnson, to Ganymede to investigate what is going on there. Johnson gave Holden and his team the Somnambulist, as the Rocinante would be too conspicuous, and the Somnambulist was in fact carrying relief supplies the OPA were sending to Ganymede. In the show, Holden is acting on his own, as he had a falling out with Fred Johnson, but in the novels this falling out doesn't occur until after Holden returns from Ganymede. Also, the married couple of Mordechai and Melissa are characters in the book, but they aren't on the Somnambulist. Instead, they are heading up the relief effort on Ganymede, and their character traits in the books are reversed, as in the novel, Mordechai is the difficult one to deal with, who gives Holden a hard time, and Melissa is the easygoing, helpful one. I must say, I kind of like the show's version a bit better, as the book's version felt a bit jarring to all of a sudden see Naomi, Amos, and Holden on the Somnambulist, where the show takes the time to show the progression of how they ended up on the Somnambulist. So I'm going to give this a +1. Next, we see a MCR and dropship landing on Earth, which contains Bobby Draper and a contingent of Martian diplomats led by her handler, Captain Thorson. We get exposition about how Earth atmosphere, being in daylight and on the surface of a planet like Earth, has dire consequences for people born on Mars who have never been to Earth before. So everyone is given sunglasses and instructions to keep their eyes front and forward. One man gets sick and throws up. Bobby Draper refuses to wear her sunglasses, and although she squints, she's mostly okay, proving what a badass she is. Now, in the novels, we don't actually see Draper arriving on Earth, but we are later told that the Martians specifically landed at night to prevent this type of incident that we witness here. However, to the show's credit, they do have a line later in the episode where Aaron Wright apologizes that a night landing wasn't possible because they had too many ships flying around that time. Though it's implied that it's just an excuse, and really, Aaron Wright just did that to be dicks to the Martians to make their life more difficult. Which I like. It makes a lot of sense, plus it gives Draper a moment to show what a badass she is, so I'll give this a +2. So next we see Avasarala in her office talking to Aaron as they prepare for the peace talks with Mars. They talk about Venus and the science vessel, the Abergast, sent there to investigate what is going on there. But Aaron Wright tells Avasarala not to worry about Venus and to keep her mind on the peace talks. And once he leaves the room, Cotillard says that he isn't going to tell her shit about what's going on Venus, and he's going to keep her out of the loop. But Avasarala says that that's why she has an inside man on the Abergast. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video, in the novels the situation was reversed, where Aaron Wright took Avasarala out of the negotiations with Mars and put her in charge of Venus investigation instead as a way to keep her distracted, so that she wouldn't interfere with his plans to start a war with Mars. In other words, he wanted the peace talks to fail, and this happened after the brief scene of the negotiations that we got, which I'll touch on shortly. However, the situation as presented in the show is different than it was in the novels, because here Aaron Wright was involved in the Eros incident, therefore he wants to be the sole one in charge of seeing what becomes of that, and at this stage he has been cut off from Jules Pierre Mal and suspect that Mal is now dealing with Mars, so he wants to use the negotiations to learn more about this. Whereas in the novels, Aaron Wright wasn't involved in the Eros incident at all and is currently in a secret bidding war with the Martians for the ownership of the protomolecule hybrids, which once he buys, he plans to use against Mars to subjugate them for good. In the meantime, he wants to intimidate Mars during these negotiations. So he doesn't care about Venus, but he doesn't want Avasarala making any deals with the Martians that might interfere with his plans. Ultimately, I think both versions work for their respective stories that they set up, but I will say I think the book's version makes slightly more sense, as in the show it seems like he still wouldn't want Avasarala making peace with Mars and wouldn't be that concerned about blocking her from Venus, so I'm going to give this a -1. So next we go on board the Abergast, where Michael Uterby is getting along well with the crew, but he doesn't get along well with the commander of the ship, Colonel Janus, who berates him for his crazy theories. Janus thinks it's ridiculous to think that aliens are involved, and thinks that Uterby is being close-minded and just using this mission as a platform to support his own crazy theories. They then discover that the Abergast is being trailed by a Martian warship. So in the novels, we never get any scenes on board the Abergast. We just hear about it secondhand from Michael John de Uterby, who is an engineer on Earth who reports to Avasarala what happened to the Abergast. He is just a stuffy engineer who doesn't at all resemble the show's eccentric Michael Uterby. And in the novels, there was never a Martian ship trailing the Abergast, though it is implied that Mars had its own ships in orbit of Venus observing the Eros crash site as well. Plus, in the novels, it's common knowledge that the protomolecule is alien in nature, as a lot more time has passed between books 1 and 2, and what exactly happened on Eros, the protomolecule, and Protogen has all been fully explored and is all public knowledge. In fact, in the novels, knowing that there's an alien presence doing something on Venus is an underlining motivation behind what many of the big players do. However, I do accept that the show did set up a different dynamic, but by shortening the time frame in which people are still unsure of what happened on Eros, and I like that we get a look on what's going on the Abergast instead of just hearing about it secondhand. Also, Michael Uterby is a much more interesting character than Michael John de Uterby. I think his eccentric nature adds a lot, so I'm going to give this a +2. So next we see Prax recording a message for Doris's relatives, telling them about her death and how she saved his life and that he'll never forget her. A very touching scene. However, when Prax tries to send the message, he finds the communications are being blocked. He calls Amos in to ask why, and Amos just simply says because the captain said so. But that answer isn't good enough for Prax, who demands to know what's going on, so Amos tells him about the protomolecule. So in the novels, Prax didn't travel to Ganymede on the Rosnate. He never left Ganymede and met up with Holden and the others on Ganymede. So we never got a scene of his access being restricted, as once he did board the Rosnate, they fully trusted him and treated him like a guest. Also, Prax found out about the protomolecule involvement at the exact same time everyone else did in the scene in the caverns. So Amos never had to reveal to him like he did here. I didn't really like the distrusting nature that they treated Prax with in the show. Seems unsuitable to Holden, so I'm going to give this a -1. So next we go to Earth, where the UN and Martian delegates meet with each other. The UN delegation consists of Ehrenreich, Avasarala, and Admiral Wynne. The Martian delegation also consists of 2 politicians and a military leader, and is led by a man named Korshunov. Wynne and the Martian admiral get into a pissing contest and do some saber rattling, while Korshunov and Avasarala try to keep the tone more cordial. They have a moment of silence for the fallen on Ganymede, but Ehrenreich breaks the silence rather quickly, saying that they should get right to it. Now, the peace summit in the novels was quite different. First of all, it didn't play out with like 2 sides with 3 delegates each staring each other down from 2 separate tables across the room. Rather, I get the impression it's more of a round table type situation, or at least a much larger room with many people there, more like a conference meeting. And the meeting itself is a lot more tedious and by the book, with officials reading the moments, going over proposals, talking in doublespeak, legalese the whole time, in a way that ultimately said nothing and avoided the real issues. These scenes didn't take up nearly as much time in the novels as they do here in the show. The reason is quite obvious, as in the book's version, these meetings were boring, so it would be too boring to spend too much time here. I actually like the show's version better, and I think they were right to spice things up and get more to the point while illustrating the tension that exists between the 2 sides. Even though the books may be more realistic, the show's version is more interesting. Also, the introduction of Korshunov as Ehrenreich's counterpart and rival, a character who didn't exist in the novels, I think was a good call. It gives a face to the Martian side that was bidding for the protomolecule, something that we didn't get in the novels, so I'm going to give this a +3. So next we go back to the Abergast, where Turby and Janice debate the presence of the Martian warship, where Janice takes it as takes it to mean that the Martians are responsible for the protomolecule and it's their weapon that they want to protect, while Turby thinks that they're just as curious as they are. The Abergast is severely outgunned by the Martian warship, so Janice puts out a signal stating that they are legally investigating the plan and any interference would be taken as an act of war, and then he proceeds to take the Abergast down to Venus. So of course no such scene exists in the novels, and it was never implied a Martian warship were trailing them, and no one ever thought that Eros was a Martian weapon, or at least not at this stage. But I do like that we're focusing on the storyline, and the introduction of the Martian warship makes sense and adds tension to the story, so I'm going to give this a +1. So then we go back to the Peace Summit on Earth, where Bobby Draper testifies on what happened on Ganymede. She reports that her team mistook a standard UN training exercise for an attack and fired by mistake, thus claiming responsibility for causing the fighting on Ganymede. Further, Korshunov puts the blame solely on Travis, a member of Draper's team, for firing the first shot, claiming that since he was Earthborn, he had something extra to prove. The diplomats plan to make reparations to the UN for having caused the incident. Now, this scene was amazing. The way it was acted, filmed, and edited was brilliant, as it illustrates Draper is clearly uncomfortable saying what she does because she knows that she's lying and that she was caught quite off guard and was quite upset that when they blamed Travis for the whole incident. But what's more evident is that Avasarala was smart enough to pick up all of this, which indicates that what the Martians are saying is not true. And the way this is really subtly filmed and executed was brilliant. Now, as for the novels, Bobby Draper wasn't sent to Earth to testify. In fact, she wasn't meant to say anything at all. It was later revealed that she was brought to Earth simply as a showpiece to put on display the fact that the Martians weren't too scared to have her there. So simply having her there was the whole point, and she wasn't meant to say anything. Further, in the novels at this stage, both parties are fully aware and acknowledge that a protomolecule hybrid was responsible for the attack on Ganymede, so Mars doesn't try to put the blame on a specific soldier in Draper's unit, nor do they take responsibility for starting the fighting. In the novels, at this stage, elements of the UN and Mars are in a bidding war over purchasing the protomolecule hybrid in secret, so the summit was just a way to stall for time. In the show, however, Korshunov is already fully involved with Jules Pierre Mao, who had cut ties with Ehrenreich. Thus, at this stage, Korshunov already has ownership, if not possession, of the protomolecule hybrids. And so they are taking responsibility for the attack as a way to distract. Either way works for the respective mediums, but I do love this scene. The way it shows off how observant Avasarala is and how she can see through people's bullshit. This is a major improvement upon the books where the conference was just boring. So I'm going to give this a +4. So then we get a follow-up scene where Bobby Draper is irate over the fact that they blamed the attacks on Travis when they knew full well that he wasn't responsible, and the fact that they didn't tell her about it. She yells at Captain Martins, who says that they didn't tell her because they knew she would react this way. But if I may, that was actually a really stupid decision because it means she had a reaction in public where the UN officials could see and determined that they were lying. But Martins insists to Draper that Travis is a hero to Mars because by blaming him they are averting a war that they cannot win, but Draper doesn't seem convinced by this argument. Now, first of all, in the novels, Martins was a totally different character and was actually really supportive, a counselor type who actually really did care about her and was helpful in her recovery over the traumatic incident that she experienced. And it was Thorson who was her handler during the Peace Summit and on Earth, and not Martins. And frankly, I'm not sure why they didn't just keep Thorson around and stuck Martins in there instead. So I'll give this a -1. So then we see Ehrenreich conferring with Secretary General Gillis, who's happy with the results of the conference and tells him to squeeze the arrogant dusters for all they have. However, once the call ends, Avasarala conveys her suspicion to Ehrenreich about the Martians lying, saying that Travis makes too perfect of a scapegoat, but Ehrenreich doesn't seem convinced. So, as I implied earlier, nothing like this took place in the novels, as the dynamic they set up was entirely different, as nothing was really accomplished at the Peace Summit. So Avasarala never got the suspicion that they were hiding something from it, though she did suspect there was more going on than what anyone was saying. But I like this scene, more building in the political tension, so I'm going to give this a +1. So then we see the delegations wrapping up negotiations where Ehrenreich asks for a formal apology and a statement of responsibility for the attacks, but Korshunov refuses to give it to him, but they proceed anyway, and Korshunov looks eager to wrap things up, but Avasarala demands to talk to Bobby Draper before they do. Korshunov is hesitant, saying that it's been an exhausting meeting, but Avasarala counters that she doubts a Martian Marine could get fatigued by sitting in a chair. So they call Draper out, and Avasarala has a casual conversation with her about the differences between Earth and Mars. Korshunov gets annoyed by this and asks where she's going with this, and Avasarala responds by saying, "Wherever the hell I goddamn like." She then moves her conversation with Draper more specifically to Travis and was he a good soldier, and she expertly goads her into admitting that he was a good soldier and that he wouldn't have fired first, and Avasarala pressures her further until she admits that a seventh man was attacking the UN soldiers and then attacked them, and the seventh man wasn't wearing a vac suit. Just then, Martins interrupts and says Draper isn't feeling well, but Avasarala tells him, "Whoever the fuck you are, stand down unless there's something you don't want her to say." Korshunov then tells Draper to do as instructed, which on the surface appears he's telling her to answer Avasarala's questions, but really what he's saying is do as she was instructed to lie earlier before she came here. So she does and says that it was Travis who instigated the incident. But Avasarala is obviously not convinced. So in the novels, nothing like this happens. Instead, at the tedious meeting where bureaucrats drone on about useless shit, Draper gets so fed up and frustrated with this she has an outburst and says, "Excuse me, but what about the monster?" And eventually, when people ignore her and don't listen to her, she throws her tablet across the room and freaks everyone out and says, "What about the fucking monster?" Thorson tries to get her to be quiet, but she ignores him, and others don't really want her to speak, but Avasarala lets her talk as she's interested in what she has to say. And she just rants about how the whole talk is meaningless, that they need to do something about the monster, but the bureaucrats there just ignore her, and Thorson ends up escorting her out of the meeting. I must say I like the show's version of events so much better, as this is some of my favorite Avasarala moments of the entire show, as it shows off what a badass she is, and I just love how she knows she has a lot of power, and she knows how to use it, and she knows how to manipulate Draper to say exactly what she wants, and Martins doesn't want her to. In fact, Korshunov recognizes this, which is why he tries to silence her. It's brilliant. So I'll give this a +5. So we then switch back to the Abergasts, where Janice and Turby argue more over the existence of alien life in the universe and how likely it is that that's what they're dealing with. And just when Janice appears to have shut Turby down, an officer alerts that they are detecting strange activity on Venus around the Arrow's crash site that indicates forms of life where there shouldn't be any. Dr. Turby transmits this data to Avasarala, who ruminates that Arrows changes everything, just like a soldier in Ganymede without a vac suit. So it's indicating that Avasarala is forming the connection between Arrows and what's happening on Ganymede. Now, in a novel, she made this connection long ago as she read reports of a spike of activity on Venus right around the time of the Ganymede incident. However, the show changed this to have Holden be the one detecting this activity. But either way is fine, so I'll give this a 0. So next we see Alex take the Rocinante to hide it behind a moon of Jupiter to lay in wait while Holden and the others go to Ganymede on the Somnambulus. We see him shut down the ship's systems and listen for outcoming signals. Now in the novels we don't actually see Alex do it. This happens in between chapters, and we hear from Holden's thoughts about how Alex is hiding out nearby in the Rocinante, although the way Holden tells it, Alex is probably cuddled up with a blanket and a space heater, as it's supposed they lose heat when cutting the system. Although maybe that isn't the case, maybe it's just what Holden thinks is the case. So although I like how the show focuses more on Alex and we aren't just told in dialogue that Alex is waiting somewhere we actually get to see it, I still don't know how necessary this scene was, so I'm going to give this a -1. So we then go to the Somnambulist preparing to land on Ganymede, where Melissa is still defiantly against the mission, talks about how Holden and the others are going to get them all killed. Mordechai mentions that when they land on Ganymede, thugs will come aboard and take 10% of their cargo, and it's normal operating procedure. When Holden says it doesn't have to be that way, Melissa warns Holden not to do a goddamn thing, as he'll just make things worse. They then land, and Naomi, Holden, Alex, and Prax depart. Now, in the novels, Naomi poses as captain of the Somnambulist, Amos as the first officer, and Holden as just the lesser crew member. He grows a scraggly beard as a disguise, but apparently it doesn't fool anyone. They apparently have to wait for many hours before given permission to land on Ganymede, as Ganymede is launching tons of cargo ships carrying food to other parts of the belt. Holden asks about the irony of tons of ship leaving Ganymede with food while he's delivering food as release supplies to the people on Ganymede. But the operator explains that the food leaving doesn't belong to them, it belongs to the corporations that operate out of Ganymede, and they are at risk of losing tons of money. This doesn't sit right with Holden or Naomi, but Amos isn't surprised at all. Once they land, Holden encounters a man posing as a port authority who says that there's something wrong with their manifest, but Holden immediately identifies the man as a con artist sent to con them out of some of their supplies. So Holden pulls a gun on the man and pulls a gun on the man's goons and threatens to have Amos beat the man to a bloody pulp, and while Holden holds the gun to the goons to make sure they don't interfere. So the man runs away in terror. As much as I like the book's version of events, which I do like, I think what happened in the show is a lot more intense and succinct, so I'm going to give this a +1. So the thugs come on board the Somnambulist, but instead of 10%, they want all of their supplies and their ship, and they pull guns on the pilots to ensure this happens. The lead thug then makes comments about how the Weeping Somnambulist is a unique name, and if he has to deal with one more ship named after a lover that had a fling on Titan, that he's going to start shooting people for general lack of creativity. Melissa then jokes that they were thinking of naming the ship after her goldfish. The thug then remarks that she's funny, that most people are just scared shitless of them, and he mentions that the other thug had his sense of humor chemically removed. Mordechai then agrees to their demands, but then Holden and Amos show up and start shooting. They manage to kill the thugs, but in the process, Mordechai is killed, and Melissa cradles his dead body as she cries. Naomi shows up and tries to console her, but she yells at them to get out, saying if they don't leave, she'll call the authorities and have them arrested, so they leave. So in the novels, as I said, Melissa and Mordechai were just relief workers on Ganymede. They don't die nor get threatened in this manner. And this scene is kind of a combination of the scene I just mentioned with the thugs trying to scam Holden and a scene that takes place in orbit before they land, where they have to submit to a UN inspection where they are boarded. The dialogue about the uniqueness of the ship's name and the retort that it would be named after the goldfish was taken directly from the scene, but it was the UN inspector that said this to Naomi, who is posing as the ship captain. The inspector made the comment about his Marines having their sense of humor chemically removed, and he generally seemed impressed with Naomi for having a sense of humor instead of just being scared of them. And I must say, I think the dialogue makes a lot more sense in that context, as it seems kind of out of place there, and it seems like they just repurposed it as a shout out to the books, and it doesn't really work all that well. Plus, as dramatic as Mordechai's death was, it wasn't really that necessary, and I think the whole thing with having thugs try to steal the ships make Ganymede seem more anarchical in nature, which doesn't make as much sense to me. So I'm going to give this a -3. So my final adaptation score for The Weeping Somnambulist is a +13. A good episode, an overall decent adaptation. Its strengths were definitely in the Peace Summit scenes on Earth, which I think were a huge improvement on the novels, as it features some of my favorite moments of the entire show, with Avasarala being a badass. The Somnambulist scenes were kind of meh and okay, but the rest was really good. So that's it for my book-to-show comparison for Season 2, Episode 9. I'll be back in about 3 weeks for my book-to-show comparison for Episode 10. In the meantime, you can check out my channel for more videos on The Expanse, as well as many other videos on other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Lost, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.